Thank the chairman. We've had this hearing today talking about overcriminalization. This is another area in which I think the federal government has inserted itself in a way that has now been used and politicized and weaponized against people across this country, including people of faith, and is doing so with a very specific and biased political purpose. Enacted in 1994, the FACE Act was passed with significant debate, prohibiting threats of force, obstruction, and property damage intended to interfere with reproductive health care services. It also prohibits the obstruction of and damage to houses of worship. Yet the Biden-Harris administration disproportionately used the FACE Act to target pro-life Americans. For example, Biden's own Department of Justice provided FOIA data demonstrating that a mere 8% of the FACE Act cases filed under his administration were against agitators at pregnancy resource centers, with 92% being against pro-life individuals protesting at abortion clinics. I introduced the FACE Act Repeal Act, H.R. 5577, last Congress after witnessing how the federal government used the FACE Act as a pretext to go after pro-life demonstrators. That is why I reintroduced the FACE Act, H.R. 589, in this Congress. The previous administration weaponized the FACE Act to prosecute nonviolent pro-life Americans with the harshest sentences. Through my office's review of federal data, the Biden Department of Justice brought almost a quarter of all the FACE Act prosecutions, 24% of all charges targeting pro-life activists in less than 4 years. Turning a blind eye to the anti-life activists engaged in destroying, vandalizing, and even firebombing pregnancy resource centers and churches at the same time. Over the last 4 years, the Biden-Harris DOJ demonstrated their interest in catering to the anti-life movement, more interest than protecting facilities that assist pregnant women in need. While the Trump administration continues to take positive steps to remedy the damage inflicted by the Biden-Harris administration, it's not enough to merely end this one-sided enforcement of the law. This is why we're having a markup today in which we're talking about overcriminalization. I realize this issue is going to be hotly debated. I realize it is going to be seen as political. I'm trying to be clear that I have significant reservations and concerns about overcriminalization generally, about the federalization of these issues, the over-empowerment of the Department of Justice and those people in Washington, D.C., regardless of who is in power, regardless of who is in the White House. And I believe that the FACE Act was used politically and will be used politically again in the future. To be clear, I'm getting some resistance, even in our own administration, saying we can use the FACE Act for their own purposes, to target people specifically for varying views. Say, well, we'll use it to defend churches more, and we will not use it as politicized to focus on people at places where abortions are performed. But that's not what my goal is. My goal is to alleviate the politicization in the first place, is to reduce the extent to which the federal government is empowered to even do this. While the Trump administration takes those positive steps, I believe Congress must fully repeal the FACE Act to ensure future administrations are unable to weaponize this statute against peaceful advocates. There are many reasons why Congress should repeal the FACE Act, but here are two examples. First, the FACE Act is in significant contrast to our protections under the First Amendment. The First Amendment guarantees our God-given fundamental right to free speech and free exercise of religion without our government discriminating against our viewpoints. Attorney General Garland and President Biden's DOJ selectively enforced the FACE Act by prosecuting pro-life activists overwhelmingly and clearly, statistically significantly, more so than anti-life activists, allowing violent pro-choice demonstrators to escape prosecutions at alarming rates. This blatant prosecutorial discretion violated constitutional rights and was used to selectively target disfavored speech. Such selective enforcement is contrary to the rule of law, which demands equal application. Second, the Biden-Harris administration showed us how easy it is to weaponize the FACE Act to further partisan anti-life motives. After the Dobbs decision, the Biden-Harris DOJ called to increase the urgency of the DOJ's enforcement of the FACE Act to protect abortion access. The DOJ would rather focus its time and resources on going after pro-life grandmothers, sentencing them to years of federal prison for, at best, a trespassing charge, instead of targeting actual criminals who walk free for violent crimes. And by that, I'm referring to a literal grandmother who was put in prison for having sat at a abortion center and prayed. She was put in prison for years while sick for exercising her beliefs and her rights. In the wake of hundreds of churches and pregnancy resource centers being attacked, the Biden-Harris DOJ focused its resources on using the FACE Act against pro-life advocates peacefully exercising their rights and beliefs to defend the unborn. sentencing many of them to years of federal prison for at best trespassing charges instead of the actual criminals who walk free. In 2022, the Biden-Harris DOJ brought 26 prosecutions under the FACE Act, and all of them involved pro-life defendants protesting at abortion clinics. In 2022, the Biden-Harris DOJ brought 26 prosecutions under the FACE Act. All of them involved pro-life defendants protesting at abortion clinics. Perhaps the most egregious of these was Mr. Houck. In 2021, Mr. Houck was doing sidewalk counseling outside an abortion clinic. During the incident, a clinic volunteer began verbally harassing his 12-year-old son who accompanied him that day, which led to him to push the belligerent volunteer escort of the abortion clinic away from his son. After local authorities declined to press charges, the Biden DOJ stepped in, dispatching a team of FBI agents to arrest Houck at gunpoint during a pre-dawn raid in front of his terrified wife and children. The Biden-Harris DOJ charged Houck with 2 counts of violating the FACE Act. Houck faced 11 years in federal prison if convicted. Thankfully, a jury rightfully and swiftly acquitted Houck on all charges, but many such defendants are not as fortunate. At a hearing in my subcommittee last December, we discussed the stories of Paul Vaughn, Lauren Handy, by the way, who is a progressive activist, Eva Idle, who survived concentration camps in Europe, and Paulette Harlow, the grandmother to whom I was just referencing, going to jail. The FBI raided Mr. Vaughn's home, arresting him in front of his wife and 11 children for praying outside of the clinic. The Biden-Harris DOJ prosecuted Mr. Vaughn and sentenced him to 6 months of home confinement and 3 years of probation. Juxtapose Mr. Vaughn's and Mr. Houck's cases with those of anti-life individuals. In 2023, the Biden-Harris DOJ prosecuted 4 individuals for spray painting threats on Florida Pregnancy Resource Center. 3 of these activists received 30 days in prison. The politicized nature of these prosecutions cannot be ignored. H.R. 589 eliminates the possibility that everyday Americans can face felony convictions for peaceful acts such as sidewalk counseling or singing hymns. Passage of this bill is a crucial and necessary step. To be clear, it does nothing to undermine existing state laws, does nothing to undermine the ability of local and state prosecutors to enforce the law in their communities as appropriate, does nothing to undermine the ability to use other federal laws when you're engaging in criminal enterprise across state lines if you're engaged in that behavior. There are plenty of other ways to go after and prosecute individuals who are carrying out dangerous acts of violence. And certainly you can do it at the state level and the federal level. But having a statute such as this in place is begging for it to be politicized. It was politicized, and Americans have been put in prison as a result of their beliefs, and it should not remain in place. With that, I yield back.